I know. Okay, so let's talk about stretch. We're going to talk about drawing polygons today, stretching, the actual stretch command, and then I'm going to show you how to stretch using grips. All right. So I'm going to delete this here. Well, let me undo that. I'm going to move that. Okay, I'm going to delete this little guy, and I'm going to delete that little guy. All right. So one of the biggest things so people who hand draft, you know, well, I guess maybe it's becoming more fewer and far between, but there are still people that hand draft out there and say, oh, you know, I could hand draft a plan just as quick as you could, you know, draw it up in AutoCAD, so I don't really see any reason to learn the technology, right? And maybe that's true. I don't know. I doubt it. But where hand drafting, where it sort of falls short, is in changes, right? And so this command, specifically stretch, is one of those where when people say, oh, I could just hurry and hand draft it up, you know, quicker than you could do it, I'd say, yeah, but can you change things as quick as I can, right? So that's where we sort of really depart in speed and being concise is really this stretch command. Stretch will allow you, let me just come up here, here's our little stretch command right here. It will allow you to stretch objects in or out, changing their dimension using this command, right? So it's a selection-based command. So what I want to do is I want to show you how it works first, and then I want to go back and talk about the methodology on how to make it function the best. Because the command is in and of itself is not that difficult, really. It's just knowing how to select the items and how they're going to function that makes it, I think, difficult for people to use. Okay, so I'll give you a few examples of how it works, and then we'll talk about means and methods. Okay, so stretch, right? So I click on stretch here, right? I can select, for example, the top of this building. And let me just show you, right, first we have some dimensions here, 18'8", right, 15'10". So we do have some dimensions illustrating how big this plan is. So stretch, the shortcut command at the keyboard is S. So I click on stretch, and I drag my mouse over the top of this, click, enter, click, move in the direction I want to go, and you can see how stretching. And as I stretch it and I move my mouse, you see that dimension kind of on the left side there. You know, it's measuring, right? 34, 32. So I'm going to turn my ortho on real quick. With my ortho on, I get a very straight stretch, right? If I turn my ortho off, F8, I get a very skewed stretch, right? So F8, and I move my mouse up, and I can just click to place the stretch, or I can type in a dimension, 15 foot, enter. Okay, so essentially I just increased those two rooms by 15 feet. S for stretch, enter. I select, enter, click, move in the direction I want to go, and I can bring it back down, click. Okay, we're going to make this a little bit larger just for fun. Okay, we'll make that look about like that. Okay. All right, so that's how stretch works, right? It takes objects using a selection window, and you do have to use a selection window for stretch, and it alters the dimension of those objects, okay? So the way that stretch works is that if I grab objects sort of like the end of an object, like this, right, it will stretch the end. And sort of where I select, right, so this line where my cursor is moving back and forth, right, this line right here becomes elastic, right? So I click, this point all along here becomes elastic, and it stretches out, okay? It's elastic and it stretches because I've only selected the top part, all right? Which is different from, for example, if I wanted to, I could stretch this window. S for stretch. I could stretch this window, and because I selected it in its entirety, I grabbed the entire window, it stretches the entire window over, right? And you're probably thinking, well, what's different in the idea of moving that window and the idea of stretching it, right? And this drawing was drawn a little bit poorly. I'll just say that. Not poorly, but maybe not the way I would have wanted it to be drawn. Let me just show you a reasoning why stretching is better than moving in this instance, right? So if I were to, I'm going to delete this real quick. Ideally, when you are drawing windows and doors, you leave a gap in the wall for them, right? So that the pen weight of the object in that opening reads, right? So if I had let those wall lines, the yellow wall lines, pass through that window, instead of getting a nice thin magenta line, right, I would have gotten a very thick yellow line running through it, okay? Now this one, this floor plan is a little bit of a bad example because whoever drew it, they did draw it like that, right? And so what I did is I went and I drew little lines at the edge of the window, trimmed out the stuff in between, and I, you know, left the window in its place, okay? So what is nice about stretching a window like this as opposed to moving it is that when it's actually drawn correctly, right, S for stretch, I grab the entire object, okay, everything looks really nice and neat, meaning if I were to move it, you see how it leaves behind, it doesn't stay in its opening, right? So that is a reason why you would want to stretch objects like this instead of move them, okay?
So you would actually select the entire wall then, including the window?
Yeah, so when I'm stretching this / moving it using stretch, I grab the wall, I grab the window, right? And essentially the wall around this window becomes elastic. So the wall is stretching back and forth, and in doing that, it's moving the window. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I can move things using the stretch command. I can alter them so that they're larger. I can shrink them in so that they're smaller, okay? And I can use stretch on anything, okay? Now, this is the formal stretch command, all right? I can also, there's kind of an informal stretch command. I'm just going to draw a couple of lines here, all right? And we'll go back over how to use the formal stretch command in a second again, but let's talk about how we stretch things sort of informally, all right? So these lines, and every line and generally every object in AutoCAD, they have what are called grips on them. And grips are these blue endpoint, midpoint, you know, endpoint markers, essentially. So you'll usually see them like on a line segment at the beginning, at the end, and in the middle, right? And it doesn't really matter how long the object is. If we have a circle, right, we see one in the middle and at the 4 quadrants. So usually the grips are going to be at a snap point on an object, okay? So grips will also allow you to stretch things. So if I click on an object like this line, if I grab the end of this, if I click on the grip, the end of this line, let me just say, right now this grip is blue, right, which means it's cold and it's uneditable. But if I click on that grip, it turns red, which means it's hot, and now it's editable, okay? So I hit escape and it deselects that grip. So I click on that grip, it turns red, and then I move it in the direction I want to go, click, and I can stretch that object. Okay. Now this is more of a simple type stretch where, you know, I'm just taking one line to another point, all right? I'm not taking an entire end of a floor plan, you know, and stretching it out 5 feet or whatever, okay? So click, I grab the end grip by, you know, if I hover over it, it turns red. Click, let go, move in the direction I want it to go, click. I could also have typed a dimension. I'm gonna hit undo, click, click on that grip, move in the direction I want to go, and type 5 foot, enter, and it stretches that out 5 feet. Okay, so you'll see me actually doing that quite a bit. Like if, you know, we can use trim, we can use extend, right? But I can either type TR, enter, enter, click, and extend, right? Or EX, enter, enter, and extend that out. Or I could just click, drag it out, click, right? So you'll see me a lot of times if geometry doesn't meet, or if I want to move something very quickly or stretch it out, you'll see me using grips to stretch things actually quite frequently, okay? If I use the middle grip on an object, so for example, this grip, click, click, stretches. This grip, click, click, stretches. But if I grab the middle grip, click, it moves it, okay? And you'll see that with like this circle, click, click, right? So this grip, click, click, stretches, click in the middle, move it, okay? So grips are the informal way of stretching, all right? Let's talk about and sorry, we're going to move on to blocks this week as well. And I just want to point out, okay, so this object, this window right here, this is a block, right? We'll talk about exactly what those are. But essentially it's a group of objects, lines, rectangles, circles, sometimes we have attributes and different things like that. But it's a collection of items that we sort of glue together so it acts as one object, essentially, okay? It's a little more complicated than that, but really that's what it's about. And when I click on that object that is all glued together into a block, you'll notice that even though I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, I only have one grip associated with all those lines, right? And that grip is the insertion point for that block. So I know that this is a block because I click on it, and I also know it's a block because I only have one grip on that object, all right? Now, a grip on a block, when I click on that, click, move it, click, right? It moves it. It doesn't stretch it, okay? And undo. All right, any questions on grip so far? All right, so let's get into stretch. And it's one command, but funny enough, it's kind of a big topic, okay? Okay, I need to drink a coffee first, right? I strayed away from stretch for a really long time when I learned AutoCAD. Stretch and, well, there were three things that I didn't really like about AutoCAD when I started using it. Stretch was one of them. I avoided the UCS icon like crazy, and LT scale, right? So those three things, I was just like, okay, they never work. I don't understand them. I don't, and so it took me a little while to kind of engage them, and now I don't know why. After you use them forever, you're like, these are great, and, but it is a little bit daunting, and it is a little bit finicky, and you have to learn how to use it right. Otherwise, it won't function for you. Okay. So let's talk about stretch, and let's talk about how we're going to make it work, okay? Stretch is all about selection. That's how you're going to make stretch work, okay? I can S for stretch, enter. I can click and I can grab these objects, enter. Well, sorry, let me go back. S for stretch. I can select all these objects using a selection window, click. One thing I want to point out first before we get into the actual command is that I have clicked, I have selected, I have clicked again, and I've used a selection window, okay? But I've accidentally picked like this piece of text. Jameson's putting, not ours, but he's putting together a 3D printer in there. We ordered ours assembled and they're taking forever to get here. But that one's gonna go to the library, so it's for public use.
What's it for? What is it?
It's a little 3D printer.
Oh, that's what he's doing.
Yeah. Anyway, so I have these objects that I've selected in here, and I'm thinking, well, I don't really want to stretch this object or that object right there, right? One thing I want to show you is that within a selection, you can remove objects, right? So right now it says select objects, and I've selected everything I need to, but I want to remove something, okay? So I'm going to type R, enter. Okay, and it's not actually an option you see, right? And it's not an option you see because I'm in a stretch command. I'm not in a selection command. So when I'm in an actual selection command, it will allow me options for selection, right? Usually. Because I'm in the stretch command, it doesn't give me all of the selection options. But if I type R, enter, remove objects, I can click, and remove any of the objects I don't want in my selection set, okay? And when I'm done, I hit enter. And everything else remains selected, all right? So that's one thing. So stretch is about picking everything wholly, right, correctly, and then removing things that maybe you don't want in there, right? So I want to stretch the stairs, S for stretch. I grab this, click, and then I think, oh, I don't want that dimension. R, enter, click, enter, and I'm ready to go, okay? All right, so first thing, you can select objects and then you can remove, things from the selection set, okay? Next thing, stretch only works with the formal stretch command when you're using a selection window. So I can't type S for stretch, enter, and then pick, right? I can't do that, all right? I need to come in with one selection window, select everything I want to stretch on my first try, and then perform my stretch, okay? And so that's why, you know, I don't get uncomfortable when I'm selecting almost the entire drawing, because I know, number one, I have to select everything I need on the first kind of swoop, but then I know that I can remove things from that selection set if I need to. Okay, so select everything and then remove things as you need to. Okay, selecting everything is important. So when I select, for example, when I want to stretch the top half of this floor plan, S for stretch, I start way up here in the top right hand corner, right? I don't start over here, because if I start over here I miss, right, some things, and I can't go back and select again. I need to get everything on the first selection or it just doesn't function very well, right? If I had selected all of these objects, enter, right, I would have made that wall right there kind of goofy, right? Okay, so S for stretch, enter, and I select up, and I'm over enough that I get all of these objects, including the dimensions. So when I stretch the wall, I get the correct dimensions, right? I'm above the floor plan, right? I could be all the way over here, it doesn't really matter, but I just want to make sure I'm above and I'm off to the side enough that I get everything. Click. I also want to make sure that I go over to the left and I make sure that I get everything on the left hand side, right? You see that? So I'm above and I'm off to the left enough that I select everything that I want to stretch, okay? So I'm grabbing some text, right? Maybe I'll take that out after I'm done. I'm also noticing here that I'm grabbing the edge of this window, right? And I kind of messed that up and stretched that window, right? So maybe I don't want to go all the way as far as going down to that window because I don't want to stretch the window. So maybe here's kind of a good spot to stretch because I hit these walls, but I don't grab that window. If I wanted to stretch the window, I could go move down and grab that window. Okay. So, this is a pretty good selection set for stretching the top half of this floor plan. All right. Click, enter when I'm done selecting. Right. And if I wanted to, I could have removed this and, you know, some other things. All right. So now that I've selected everything appropriately, it's asked me to specify a base point. Okay, the base point, again, it's like any other command. It's just kind of a stationary point that you measure from, right? So it doesn't really matter where it's at. I can click over here, click, move in the direction I want to go. I can click again, or I can type a dimension, 5 foot, enter. Okay, and it stretches that whole top half of my floor plan down, right? Let's look at maybe this side of the floor plan. Oh, my window is not happy. I'll just stretch it down. Okay. All right, so I just stretched my floor plan down. Okay. Let's look at maybe again this side of the stretch, and I'm going to do create a rectangle that would visually show where my stretch is going to be. So if I were to stretch this side of the floor plan, this is my selection window, right? Again, I'm up and above the floor plan enough that I can grab kind of everything in the floor plan, right? I am picking a good spot on the wall where there's not a window or something I don't want to stretch out, right? I've encompassed all of these objects. Down here on this wall, this is a good stretch point because it's a wall and it will stretch straight. If I had selected in the middle of the door, let me show you what would happen. And this is why people think, I just don't want to use stretch, it's too much, right? Because if you create the wrong stretch, that's what happens, right? The wrong stretch point. Okay, so I pick in the wall here, and I pick in the wall there, and then, oh, I hit the window right there, but maybe I can just deselect the window in my selection, right? And because I have so many other good stretch points along the way, I feel like this is a pretty good stretch window, okay? So S for stretch, I'm going to select my objects. I'm moving over, right? That diagonal wall at the top, I want to capture that to maintain its integrity as whatever angle it's at. And I move over to here, right? Looks pretty good, click. Now before I get out of selection, I type R, enter. and I'm going to get rid of that window because I don't want to stretch the window. Done selecting, I hit enter. Okay, let's look at it. Click to establish my base point, move in the direction I want to go. And what's nice about this, AutoCAD didn't used to do this, that preview, that grayed out preview, right? It's kind of nice to be able to see sort of if you're moving in the right direction, right? I could type in a dimension, okay? Now again, one thing, I don't have my ortho on, all right? Which is kind of problematic because I don't want to really be guessing at, I don't really want to be guessing on whether or not I'm getting a straight line, right? So make sure your ortho's on when you're trying to draw or stretch straight, ortho, right? Not immediately my lines straighten out. And I type in 15 foot, enter. And it stretches that side out 15 feet, okay? Pretty good. And we'll do one more stretch over here, okay? And let me just say, this is going to be your assignment. This is this stretch assignment. And so there's instructions in the file. Add 2 feet to the right of the house. Add 3 feet to the width of the garage. So you're going to stretch the garage door. Increase the garage door opening to 16 feet and center the door in the opening, right? And you're going to do all these things using stretch. So let me show you how to go about a few of these things, okay? Let's stretch out the garage one more time, and then I'll show you how to move and center a few of these objects using stretch, and then how we're going to make, you know, this garage door a little bit bigger using stretch. Okay, so if I want to stretch this left-hand side, S for stretch. You know, again, I've started kind of up here in space, out enough that I capture everything, and including the dimensions. You're thinking, well, I'm stretching the wall, not the dimensions, right? But the dimensions are actually attached to the wall, and they read dimensions off the wall, right? So you do kind of essentially want to grab those at the same time so that they read properly and look right. Click. If I want to stretch just the wall out, right, here looks like it's a pretty good place to stretch. If I move into that garage door on the bottom, right, it's going to stretch out that garage door. I could deselect it, right, but you know, maybe a better way of going about it is just kind of grabbing that wall right there. Click. Enter. Click to establish a base point. Move in the direction I want to go, and I will type 5 foot, enter. Oh, did I do stretch?
Yeah, but you used the blue selection window.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's like what? Like what the? Okay. Didn't even notice that. Did I really? I did that?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever realized that that's what happens when you. So it kind of just moves it essentially, right? When you. That's interesting. Okay. S for stretch. Click. Okay. So in this case, I started up here, right? Because it's in the plane of where I want to start my stretch, and then I moved over past the floor plan. Click, enter, click, move in the direction I want to go, and my ortho's on so I get a nice neat stretch, and we'll type 10 foot, enter. Okay. All right. So all of those stretches are great, but they were all, I guess, what I'm going to call easy stretches, right? Because they are on the outside of a building. And it's very easy to kind of capture the end of a building and move it in the direction you want to go. What's more difficult is when you're in the interior and you've got doors and you've got dimensions and you have plumbing fixtures and a lot of things happening, right? How do you stretch interior things? And you know, there may be some decisions you have to make on those interior things. Let me just say that, okay? So part of the instruction, if I remember right, is to stretch your bathroom so that it increases to 8 feet. Yeah, so increase the bathroom width to 8 foot. All right. So I look at this and I think, well, if I stretch this side of it, that will interfere maybe with the stairs. And this is a whole continuous line that goes from there to there. So if I want to stretch the bathroom this direction, it's not going to work that well. Maybe a move would be a better option for that. So in my mind, I'm thinking they must mean move it, you know, kind of to the right. Now, okay, so if I want to stretch this bathroom, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to stretch the bathroom walls, right? S for stretch. I could zoom in here and hopefully kind of grab this bathroom wall and come down here. But I'm thinking, oh gosh, you know, number one, I'm engaging a door here, right? Number two, I'm engaging a door here, okay? So, you know, if I click and stretch, that may not work very well, right? Okay. Okay, S for stretch. You know, so instead of maybe thinking about grabbing this bathroom wall, instead, in my mind, I think, well, I'm just going to grab back here, and I'm going to, you know, stretch this bathroom with this selection window. Because by doing that, it will move this wall back. It will stretch the bathroom right here so that this door isn't affected. And because I am stretching from here to here, those two other doors to the right of the bathroom, right, the top and bottom one, they're enclosed entirely in my selection window, which means they'll move, so they won't stretch, okay? So you have to kind of think about, you know, not only am I stretching the bathroom, but other elements around it are going to be affected by that stretch, right? So S for stretch, I click over here. This is a nice, you know, right here is a good stretching line for walls. I come over here, you know, I'm passing the door because I don't want the door to be a weird dimension or skew. Click. But what's going to happen is I click and I move, my bathtub starts getting really big, right? And so I think, okay, that the selection window looks pretty good because everything, those doors are stretching very nicely, right? But I needed to probably deselect the bathtub before I stretched. So S for stretch. I'm going to grab these objects again. Click. Now R, enter, R for remove. I'm going to remove that bathtub. Enter. Click, move in the direction I want to go, and type 2 foot, enter. Right. Now there's a lot of, and I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete that little wall right there, and then you think, well, I've got this space here. Well, you know, wherever you're working or whatever, you'll make a design decision, right? So maybe this becomes something of a mechanical shaft, right? Something to that effect. You put something there, right? Or you move the bathtub or whatever. You know, there's obviously a reason you're redesigning the bathroom, making it bigger, so you'll have to, you know, make a decision on what happens there.
You move the bathroom to 10 feet and then you put a shower.
There you go. There you go. That's exactly it, right? Okay, so, you know, I think maybe this is a really good illustration of when you move things, you don't just kind of affect one area, right? So I stretched the bathroom wall, but in doing that, I had to move the study door, and this door had to move. And so really, my selection set for the stretch became very large, which you may not have quite expected, right? It involved the study and the bathroom. If I wanted to extend maybe this kitchen island, right? S for stretch. You know, I think you get into the mindset of, well, I'm just going to pick what is pertinent here, right? But really, you kind of have to go a little bit further than that, right? Stretch that out. Okay. So the selection, that's really going to help you be able to stretch your walls and different architectural elements pretty easily, okay? Next topic is, how do we effectively use stretch to move things, right? Some of the instructions say, you know, center the window on the wall, or, so we'll do that, right? Center the window on the wall, or move this window from the edge of the wall out 6 feet, or whatever, right? Those will be some of the things you'll have to do. Or make this garage door 16 feet, or whatever, right? Well, stretching the garage door is pretty easy. S for stretch, I grab that, whoop. S for stretch, I grab the whole end of the garage. If I grab the whole thing, it would move it, right? So if I grab the whole thing, it would move it, right? So I just grab one end, S for stretch, enter, I grab the end, click, enter, click, move in the direction I want to go, right? And because it was 10 feet and I want it to be 16, I type 6 foot, enter. Okay, so that's pretty easy, right? So how do I take, for example, something like this window, and how do I center it about this wall? Using stretch, right? I'm going to use a stretch command, and I know that if I want to move something using the stretch command, then I'm going to select it in its entirety. So S for stretch. And I want to grab this dimension because I want to, you know, maintain it. So click. I grab in sections of the wall all around that window. Click. Enter. Now for my base point, I'm not going to click in space because I want to center this window about this wall length. Okay? So instead of just clicking in space and moving it, I'm going to click on its midpoint because I want it to be centered on that wall. Click. And I'm going to use M2P, mid between 2 points, to make it work. Okay. We haven't used it a lot. We talked about it last week a little and a long time ago, but it's an object snap. So if I grab the middle of that window, right, I can move back and forth. Maybe your initial thought is, well, I'm going to try and snap to a midpoint somewhere, but it's likely not going to happen, right, because your wall is sort of moving. I'm going to shift, right click, M2P, mid between 2 points. I click my first edge, and it looks really weird, right? You're thinking this can't be right, but it is. I'm going to grab that end point, click. I'm going to pick the second point to center it about, click, and it puts it right in the middle. You do that again.
I was able to snap to the midpoint of the wall.
Oh, did it let you?
Yeah. Maybe because, well, you changed the window in this, right? You changed it to be proper.
Right.
I'm wondering if because it's done this way, you can actually find the midpoint.
That's right. So the file that you have, the wall goes through the window. So you likely could have found the midpoint. That's a good point, yeah. But that's going to be rare because they 99.9% of the time they won't be drawn that way. Yeah. So S for stretch. I grab the whole window and the dimension. Click. Enter. I click the midpoint of the window. Click. Shift, right click. M2P. I grab the endpoint over here of this wall. Click. The endpoint of that wall. Click. And it centers it. I can do the same thing over here. S for stretch. Grab that middle window, right? Enter. Click a midpoint. Click. Shift, right click. M2P. And I click once, click. Click twice, click, and it centers that window. Now if I want to center these windows between the window and the wall here, you know, just keep going. S for stretch. Click, shift right click, M2P. Click the edge of the window, right click, click, there you go.
You got to be careful doing that too because depending on where you want the window centered, it'll either be the inside of the room or the outside.
Right, yep, that's a good point. So I'm centering on from the outside of the wall, right, which is 6 inches bigger than from the inside. So yeah, you'll want to make sure you center it specifically however you want it done. Yep, that's a good point. S for stretch. Grab the midpoint, click, shift right click, M2P, click, click, and there you go. Same thing with the garage door. S for stretch. Grab the whole thing because I want to move it, right? And enter, shift right click. Oop, nope, I should have clicked the midpoint here. Click, shift right click, M2P, and I click here once, click a second time, and it centers it. Now I picked the bottom midpoint of this this door because if I had grabbed the top midpoint, let me show you what would have happened. S for, let's see, stretch, enter, click, shift right click, M2P. If I grab the top, click, click, see how it kind of diagonaled those two wing walls down a little bit, right? Because it took this and it centered it about that same plane, right? Okay, so I'm going to undo that, obviously. We want it to look nice and straight. Okay. All right, any questions on any of that so far? No? All right, so your assignment here will be add 2 feet to the right of the house, right? So over here, you're going to want to grab this, you know, very nicely and stretch it over. Add 3 feet to the width of the garage. Okay, well, we talked about that. Increase the garage door to 16 feet and center it in the opening. Okay. Stretch the 3 windows in the garage wall so they are evenly spaced. Okay, we did that. Center the double door in the family room on the interior walls. All right, let's do that. So we want to take this door and center it between these 2 walls. Okay. So S for stretch. I'm going to grab that entire door. And I think, oh, I don't want to have that text, right? Remove, click, enter, and I'm going to grab the midpoint of this. Let's see, I'm going to grab the bottom. And I say the bottom because I'm thinking about, I have a snap point here, right? And I have a snap point here. But if I grab the top, we don't want it to kind of V down like it did on the other one, right? If I grab the top, then I somehow have to line up with something above this point to get that, you know, that end point right there. So I think I'm going to do it from the bottom. So click. It's immediately starting to stretch nicely. Shift right click, M2P. I grab the end point there. I grab the end point there. Click. Oop. Click. Oh, what did I do? I did something wrong. Stretch. Enter. Midpoint. Shift right click. M2P. Click. Click. There we go. Okay. All right. So add 4 feet to the family room and dining room. So move the wall north. So you're going to grab this entire wall right here and add 4 feet. Center all the windows on the walls where they are located. So we have this window, we have this one, this one, this one. So you're just going to use M2P to move them between these 2 walls centered. Increase the length of the kitchen counter from 8'8" to 10 foot. Reduce the width of the stairs to 3 feet. Right, so S for stretch. I'm going to grab the whole thing and I move it over a foot. Right. Increase the bathroom width to 8 feet. We went over that. And stretch any dimensions that may now sit outside the green plot window, so they are inside the plot window. Freeze these instructions before printing. So what you're going to do once you have all of this done, you're going to freeze this, right? So you remember how to freeze something. You come up here, you click on the little freeze. Those shut off. And then what you'll do is go into a layout, and you want to create a printable view. Okay, so the instructions will be to print this at whatever scale best fits on an 8.5 by 11. All right, so we will center it. Let's even just look. This will be. Let's try a quarter. Nope, too big. Try an 1/8. Ooh, still a tiny bit too big. Let's do a 1/16. I think that's probably the best. Okay. I'm going to make sure that my viewport is on my non-printable viewport layer. Let's see, new viewport. Let's see, make it non-printable, right? Close. Viewport. There we go. Control P. Let's see. LaserJet, preview it. It's tiny, but that's all right. Right. The intent of this was to make sure that we get the stretching correct, so this is fine. Well, I changed my mind. Let's see what another scale looks like. It's an off scale, but let's look at 3/32. Oh, that's better, right? fits nicely on the page. There's enough white space around it that we can kind of look at it and it doesn't feel like it's too small or too big. Better, right? Okay. So things I look for, I'll give you a little insight, right, into what I look for on these kind of things. Number one, I make sure that you print it out of paper space, right? Unless like the text one, it was appropriate to print from model space, right? But I'm looking to make sure that you printed in model space or a paper space. I'm looking to make sure that you have a viewport that is non-printable, right? So you have made a layer and it has a non-printable attribute and your viewport doesn't print. I like to make sure and I look for that you've used your pen file to print. And that's pretty evident, right? When I look at this and, you know, let's say you have something else like grayscale selected, right? I can tell you didn't use your pens, right? So I look at that and I say, oh, didn't use your pens, right? I'm looking at construction of drawings, right? You're all getting pretty good at drawing at this point. So for your drawings, I'm looking at straight lines, right? I'm making sure layers are correct. And then, you know, which you guys are all getting really good at. And then for construction of drawings, I'm looking at, did you use paper space? Did you print using a pen file? Can you create a PDF, you know, or your viewport's non-printable? So, you know, if you want to get full credit, which everybody does, just make sure that you're kind of running through that list, you know, as you're finishing your assignments, because these are like super easy points to miss and they're pretty preventable, right? So, so those are kind of the things I'm looking for, right? I'm a little bit more forgiving on maybe you missed one thing in your drawing, right? But you got everything else correct, right? So I'm gonna be more forgiving if maybe you missed something on a drawing, but it's printed from paper space and the viewport is correct and your lines are straight, and you know, even so much as looking at this and saying, you know, the drawing is kind of, it's centered on the page, right? So you're thinking about the aesthetic, you're constructing your drawing well, maybe you made a mistake and didn't quite, you missed something or whatever, right? But in general, it looks really good, okay? So just make sure that you're kind of paying attention to those things, right? For this assignment and all of your assignments. Okay, more questions on stretch so far? Not yet, right? Okay, we have a couple more things to go through today and then I'll just let you work. The first thing is I want to talk about polygons, right? So let me just look here real quick. I don't think I think I have a polygon somewhere. Polygon, there we go. Polyline, polygon. All right, I'm going to talk about how you can draw polygons, right? A polygon is a multi-sided object, of course. We can generate polygons using specific commands like rectangle, right? A rectangle is a polygon. So we can use that. You can create polygons using polyline or lines, you know, just regular lines that are not connected. But what you may not know is that we have an actual polygon tool, okay? So under the rectangle icon here, we have our polygon tool, okay? Polygons are really not that difficult to draw. There are two types of polygons that you can create, okay? You can create what's called an inscribed polygon, and you can create what's called a circumscribed polygon, okay? So if you look at this little graphic that pops up when you hover over a polygon, the one on the left is an inscribed polygon. So that means that when you generate your polygon, that if you were to think of a pretend circle where you're around your polygon being generated, it would generate your polygon inside the circle, okay? And the one on the left, or sorry, the right, is a circumscribed polygon. So when you're creating a polygon, if you think about a pretend circle around that polygon, a circumscribed polygon generates on the outside of that circle, right? Honestly, I don't kind of in my own mind understand why we have two of them, to be honest, right? Because when you're creating a polygon, you're creating it dimensional usually, so it's going to have a radius of 2 feet regardless of whether it's on the inside or the outside of a circle. Anyway, I guess I think there are other professions that use AutoCAD, so maybe they have a reason why. Anyway, so but we do have these two types of polygons, okay? And you will have an assignment to generate some polygon shapes, and you know, you just want to think through them and draw them. That's going to be the arc circle polygon. It's going to be on page 2-31. So at this point, right, that one's a little, it's not tricky really. You have to think about it to get things created, of course, just like any of these other assignments. But knowing how to draw polygons will help you do that. And then in combination with trim and extend, you'll be able to generate a lot of these, okay? All right, so let's talk about generating polygons. I have my polygon icon here. Click. And immediately down here at the command line, it says enter the number of sides for your polygon. So let's do 3. It's a triangle, right? Enter. Specify the center of your polygon, okay? So I can choose the center of a circle, I could choose the midpoint of a line, right? Wherever that polygon needs to rest, I'm going to choose the center. Click. Now, is this going to be an inscribed polygon or a circumscribed polygon? Well, let's say we're trying to copy this object. I guess this is, okay, so here's a good instance of maybe where you would use one over the other, right? But I'm going to use an inscribed polygon to create this triangle. Okay, because it's on the inside of this circle. So I for inscribed, or click on inscribed. Now I can specify a radius of the circle, right? So the radius is from the center to the midpoint. So if I had measured this circle before I actually started creating this, you know, I could type in 4, enter, and it would create the appropriately sized polygon. Or, which is, you know, something that's a lot more quick, would be just to click on a quadrant of that circle, click, and it places the polygon. Okay, so I've got my polygon number 1 created there. These are pretty simple to create, right? So I click on polygon again, specify the number of sides. We want 3 again, enter. Specify the center of your polygon, click. Okay, and now we want inscribed or circumscribed. Inscribed, click, and I want this one to look like that. You know, if I go like that, I'll get the same triangle. If I move this direction, I will get that one. Click. So just draw my little star inside there, okay? This is something that you will do on your arc, circle, and polygon. Although in the arc, circle, polygon, these lines are trimmed out. So TR, enter, enter, click, click, click. Right, so I would come in here and just trim out all of those little lines. Okay. Here we have it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexagon, right? Hexagon. We have a hexagon polygon. All right, so let's create that. I'm going to click on my polygon tool, and it says enter the number of sides. We want 6. 6. Enter. Specify the center. Click. Okay, we want inscribed because this is living on the inside of that circle. Click, right? And I can move to the edge that helps me achieve the shape that I want, right? I could type in a dimension, 6, enter, right? But for me, if I can use geometry around me to generate what I need, then I will do that, right? It's easier to click than to type. So this looks like it, you know, that is pretty good. If I had come up here, that wouldn't work as well. If your quadrant snap is not engaging, right, you're just going to come down here to your object snaps, right click, object snap, and turn on quadrant right there. I can do that right in the middle of the command, and I go back and it's still engaged, right? So click, and there's my polygon. Okay. All right, now I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to do, so there's an exercise in the book that is similar to this one, right? It has a little star in the center, but it has kind of like a triangle-like shape here, and it has one on the other side. So let me show you how I'm going to do this one, and then I'll let you guys do the rest of them. I'm going to come up here to my polygon. How many sides? 3, enter. I want to specify the center of my polygon, click. Inscribed, click. And I look at this and I think, okay, I've got one triangle that kind of goes like this, click. And I have one that goes the other direction, so I'm going to do the exact same command. I can do the exact same command by hitting enter, right, spacebar, and enter again, and specify the center, click, inscribed, and I can do that, right, click. So I essentially have this object, right, but I don't have this edge on that, so I'm going to trim that off. TR, enter, enter, click, click, click. Instead I have L for line. I've got this that goes to there and goes to there, right? And I have the same thing happening on the other side. TR, enter, enter, click, click, click. I trim those off. I could draw the lines again just like I did on this side, but we learned how to use mirror last week, so why not use mirror, right? MI, mirror, enter, click, click, enter. I'm going to specify my axes and I want it straight, so I make sure my ortho's on, F8, click, enter, and I mirrored those lines.
You could actually do that with 2 rectangles though.
Yeah.
The same geometry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You might have to.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Just cross the
Yep, you're right. Here's the thing about that though, right? Well, you can do it. You can do it. Yep. I'll let you try it out. So in my mind, I'm looking at, I didn't see those rectangles at first. I saw the triangles, funny enough, right? But I look at the rectangles and I'm like, how am I going to snap to those points on that circle?
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not exact. One of them's on a quadrant. The other one is kind of perpendicular. It might be a little harder to draw, but you could do that. So you're gonna, kind of use whatever means possible to generate those. Okay. And in fact, that actually brings up let me talk about one more command, and then let's see, polygons. Then I think we could probably stop, and we'll talk about blocks on Wednesday. But let me talk about the divide command, because Jake saw there's a rectangle here, and you think, well, I'm going to draw a rectangle, right? But it's hard to find to snap. You could snap here because it's a quadrant, but that's not really a quadrant, right? So I guess you could use nearest, or we could try and use perpendicular. Let's see if that would work. Oh, it does work. So you could use perpendicular, right, to snap to that. That works pretty well, and you could draw those lines like that. That's perfectly valid. But another way that we could go about doing this is we could use the divide command. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to just assume for what we're doing. We have 6 equal kind of spacings about this circle that we're trying to achieve. Okay. What the divide command will allow you to do is the divide command allows you to take an object like a circle or like a line or really anything, and it divides it into even increments for you to use. Okay. Now when I say divide, it doesn't actually take the line and chop it up. It just adds little markers on it, little nodes, so that you can use those to draw things with. Okay. So those nodes are called points. All right. So let's look at the divide command, and then I want to show you how to format the points so you can view them easily or change the way that they look. Okay. So hold on 1 second. There it is. Okay. So our points, right? Let me show you the divide command. I'll show you what the points look like and then how to format them. The divide command, and I don't think we actually have an icon for divide. Maybe we do. I don't think we do. Let's do the help menu. Divide. Oh, we do. Find it. Oh, there it is. I don't know why I enjoy that so much. hey, where did my, that's weird. Oh, there it is. So I have an icon divide, and so I can click on that, right? Or I can type D-I-V-I-D, divide, enter. So I initiate the command. Down here at the command line it says select the object to divide. All right, click. So it doesn't really matter the length of the object, it doesn't matter what shape it is. AutoCAD just allows you to select something and it calculates the length of it and divides it into equal pieces, right? So now it says enter the number of segments that you would like to divide it into. So let's do 4. 4, enter. And that's really all there is to it, right? It's a quick selection, you enter a number and you're done. Now on this line, I didn't really see anything happen, right? And like I said, it doesn't break it up, it's still a line. But what it does do is, you see those little points, it adds little tiny invisible points on that line that you can snap to using the node snap, okay? So I could L for line, and then as I move down that line, oh, there's my node, click, click, right? Move down, click, there's my node. Or if I wanted to, you know, CO copy something, I wanted to copy this, and I wanted to copy it to that node, right? I move till I find it, click, okay? So this will allow me to, when we start using blocks, this will allow me to move objects on to specific points on objects, you know, that are equally spaced, okay? So those little points, those little nodes, right now they're kind of like an individual little pixel. It's just one little piece of line that is the same length and width, or sorry, the same width as a line, which is a 0 width. So just put that little tiny point there, right? So you can't really see it, but you can snap to it, right? There are instances where maybe you want to be able to view those points, right? So we can format them so that you can visually see them better. We can do that by coming up to this utilities menu, and we have point style. Okay, so right now the point is just kind of like a 1x1 little tiny pixel that just rests on that line. If I click a little circle, okay, see how those pop up, right? Makes it easier to view them. So if I wanted to look at the spacing and say, oh yeah, that spacing's pretty nice, looks good, I move my objects to those points. Or I see it now and I think, oh, those are not what I want them to be, let me redo my divide, okay? These little points, like I said, this line is not chopped up, so these little points are just little markers, they're little pieces of geometry. So warning, these will print, okay? So if you are a visual person and you need to see the points, that's fine. But when you're done with them, you need to select them and hit delete. Okay? Because if they're big like that, they will print, right? I'm going to undo. If you don't mind not seeing them, and you go to utilities, you go to point style, and you can just leave them a little, you know, one little dot. They will still print, but they'll be the same width as the line, right? So you won't really see them, okay? So you could potentially leave them there and they would be fine. Good practice is to just delete them anyway, only because maybe somebody else comes into your drawing and they change the point style and then all these points pop up everywhere, right? Which happens. And so you may want to delete them when you're done, just courtesy for other people, right? But if I delete these, okay, hit delete, I can then redivide this line, div, enter, select the object to divide, click, how many segments? Let's do 8, enter. And now I have 8 segments on that same line, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? So my whole point in showing you divide is that I could div, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I could divide this circle, click, into 6 pieces, enter, and if I look at my point style, kind of like this, right, that's a node snap. So my whole argument with doing the rectangles was, well, it might be a little hard to snap to the circle, right, but if you divide it, then it's not that difficult anymore, right? I can use node snap to kind of move around. There is, I don't, it's coming in the future. There is an exercise coming in the future where that'll be really helpful. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? Not bad. All right. So has anybody done the bathroom assignment yet? Did that work out for everyone? Good. Okay. So you're going to do the arc, circle, polygon exercise. You're going to do the circle trim exercise. You are going to do the ruler offset exercise. So you have a couple of drawing exercises to work on over the next few days. And then next time we meet, we will get into blocks. So stay tuned, right? Okay, and that is it for today.